Like, we've sat in meetings and it's like, you guys sell hijab? Like, isn't that like just not cool anymore? Like, people still do that. People still wear that.
Can't they just get it from the mosque?
Yeah. Like, this was a direct quote from a guy.
Like big Wall Street, like
and recent, guy, like this is not like this is like 10, 30, 50 years ago. This was in the last.
He's like, forgive me for my potential ignorance here, but can they just like get it from the mosque? Like, why do they need to why do they need to buy it like in a store?
Assalamu alaikum, guys. My name is Mustafiz Mohsen, and today we're going to be jumping into the world of fashion. Modest fashion is one of the fastest growing segments of the global fashion industry. And even through all the noise, competition, and growth, one brand has risen to the forefront. It's Veiled Collection. Founded in 2016 by Nuro Shama and Yaser Albataineh, this husband and wife duo started with a bold vision to redefine modest fashion while juggling demanding careers. But here's where the story gets more interesting. Recognizing the potential for even greater impact, they brought on Kareem ElGendy as CEO, whose strategic leadership elevated Veiled into the #1 most trafficked modest wear company. From their spare bedroom to almost 3 million hijab products sold worldwide, Veiled is more than just a fashion brand. It's a movement, blending innovation, resilience, and values that resonate with women around the world. In this episode, Yaser and Kareem deliver a masterclass on building a business from scratch, scaling for growth, and navigating the challenges of e-commerce in a niche market. You won't want to miss this one. Welcome back to Muslim Made.
Did you guys ever think you'd be working together? Like, was this kind of like a long time coming? Or?
No. So, do I share my funny story?
Sure.
So Kareem and I actually went to NJIT undergrad together.
Sick.
I think that's the first time we really met. And he was in the architecture program at the time. And anyone that knows anything about NJIT's architecture program, they kind of live in that building. They're separated from everybody. And
they call us Archies.
You don't see them often. You know, they sometimes come out in the wee hours of the night to like maybe grab a sandwich or something, and then they scurry back to their drawing boards. But I knew Kareem from a distance. You served as MSA president one of the years that I was at NJIT. And then we kind of graduated, went our separate ways. And there was 1 year that we were both counselors at a summer camp hosted by our local masjid here, ICPC. And then we kind of linked up again. But at that time, I was kind of going through college, med school, residency. He was working on his architecture career. You know, Veiled was not even a thought at that time, nor was it anything we were working on. Years later, we started Veiled. Me and my wife started, growing it and scaling it ourselves. He was an architect / performance marketing expert. He started his own agency at that time. And someone is like, you need to talk to Kareem. Like, he's doing some cool things on the performance marketing side. Veiled is growing. You're not doing much performance marketing on your own. Hit this guy up. So I reached out to him and he's like, oh my God, long time no talk. Let's meet up. And we did meet up. We had an amazing conversation. He was so excited. My wife is like, this guy is like so cool. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I emailed him after the fact. I'm like, man, thanks for meeting up. We're very interested in like engaging your agency and like working together. Yeah. And he never replied. And it was probably like a whole year. And it even reached the point where me and my wife were joking. And I'm like, maybe I should reach out to Kareem. And she was like, no, like we're not going to talk to him. Like he completely ignored us the first time. Mashallah, he was kind of busy with his life and things were going on, and email fell through the cracks. We never followed up. And a year or two later, I reached back out to him. I'm like, listen, man, like I need you to look into this seriously and truly consider if you can take on us as a brand. It's like really exciting things happening, and I hear exciting things about you.
Yeah. No, the funny thing was we met at the same place that I had met with them initially. We met at this like Starbucks. Astaghfirullah, I know. This was before, BDS.
Free.
And then I'm like, it's great, like meeting with you guys. I love your business. And I totally forgot that we met the first time. It's not because of their brand or because of Veiled. Like it wasn't because it was interesting. At the time I was working like full time as an architect in New York. And at night, I was like, so I was an architect by day, marketer by night, for whatever reason, it was life choices. And I wasn't sure if I was going to continue in the direction of being an architect or I was going to shift into like performance marketing. So I was just so busy that when I met with them, I guess like I went into like a fugue state after. I completely forgot that we met. And then the second time we met, they were like, don't you remember we actually met here the last time? And I was like, I'm sorry, I really don't remember.
So I'm interested. What made you so excited about Veiled at that time? If you had so much going on in your life, what stood out?
Yeah, I mean, like the brand is obviously really cool, but you know, I don't wear hijab. Like I'll be honest, like it wasn't the fashion or anything. Truly, what was exciting to me, I'll defer to others about like the fashion. Now, obviously, I have an appreciation for it because I can actually like understand that. I see how the team crafts like the designs and the way that we go about it, and it's like it's an art. It's such a beautiful process. But at the time, you know, looking at the numbers, like, you know, I was able to go into their ad accounts and see they had done some experiments, they spent some money and like kind of see the results. And I was like, guys, if we can scale this, you know, this will really take off. And I had written down like we're like, you know, it's super cliche, but we're like in a Starbucks and like I take out a napkin and like I write some things down, or whatever like piece of paper we had laying around, and I think like I was like, look, like I think this is what we can achieve, and then we you know, we started working together, did some experiments, and alhamdulillah, like it's far surpassed that now. But I was just like struck by how efficient the initial experiments were.
Yeah, wow. Shifting things to the beginning of the story, I wanted to talk a little bit about big ideas. You know, when it comes to starting something, how can Muslims validate their big ideas and identify if there's a real market to serve? I'm not sure if you guys have any stories from the early days that kind of helped you understand, all right, this is the way to do it.
I mean, when Veiled started, it wasn't a big idea. It was kind of like an interesting time of our life. My wife was graduating college. She was a nutritionist, dietitian. So none of us have like a fashion, a true business, like education or training or experience. I dabbled in entrepreneurship prior. I did have a business when I was in college that I exited before medical school. So I dabbled in different things. But when it first came about, my wife had started wearing the hijab, had a really cool fashion sense, was really like in touch with her creative side, and found challenges expressing herself and being able to dress the way she wanted and maintain the modesty and the hijab, you know, the way she wanted to. And interestingly enough, my mother-in-law at that time had a very small, I don't even want to call it a manufacturing plant. She had a very small like workshop in Muscat, Oman. She was living there at the time, and she was designing some stuff. She comes from a very creative background as well. She was designing some stuff for the local market. She probably had like 10 guys, 10 sewing machines, and very, very small scale. But Nuro would design some things and send it to her mom for her personal collection, and her mom would make it for her, and she would send her some of the stuff that she was making. And that was around the time that we had met, we had gotten engaged, early parts of our marriage, and she would receive a lot of compliments everywhere we went. That is such a unique piece. That's such a cool outfit. Where did you buy that? Where did you get it? And that's when, you know, the gear started grinding a little bit. And I'm like, you know, you have a manufacturer, you have the design, there's clearly some demand and interest in it. Start off. Why not? And when Veiled first started, I think we had maybe 3 or 4 products that we launched. And it was one style. It was a kimono. So it was an open style abaya, long flowy piece that you can wear on top of a very fancy dress or on top of a pair of pants and a shirt that, you know, allow you to that style and modesty that you want. And that's all we sold. We didn't sell any accessories, hijabs, tops, bottoms, any other categories. Yeah. And kind of started off from there. And very slow start, and, you know, social media and attending some small local community events and things like that. And, you know, it started rolling from there. As we spoke to more people and spent more time with our customers, we, you know, one of the early parts of our success was attending a lot of the trade shows and the trunk shows and the bazaars at like ICNA and ISNA. We would travel all over the country. We would go to the local masjid who was having like a Eid bazaar for like a couple hours to sell, you know, random trinkets and random things. We'd set up a table and we'd talk to people. We'd get feedback. We'd learn. People loved the product. People wanted more. People had the same struggle that she had. It's really hard to find modest clothing in this market, and the alternative was to order from overseas. That also had its challenges with quality, with cost, with shipping, with taxes, with duties, and that's kind of how things took off. And we slowly just kept adding to the catalog until it became what it, you know, is today. And we're still at a point where it's like people still want more. There's still so much that the market is hungry for and asking for, but you can only do so much at once. So like we really want to perfect our craft, you know, produce a beautiful garment, a good quality garment, an affordable garment that will last a lifetime, that'll serve its purpose. and then kind of add that next category, next category, next category.
Wow. How important do you think that is when it comes to starting off early? Do you think it's critical for people who want to enter the space to have essentially boots on the ground and walking around and seeing if people comment and saying, hey, that's cool? Or do you think you should lean a little bit forward and just go for, a line and having, the e-commerce setup and that kind of thing? Should you kind of start with yourself and seeing if you have feedback first?
I mean, I think feedback is good, but spending too much time gathering that feedback can slow you down or stop you from ever even starting. So at a certain point, you need to put your head down, make a commitment, and get going. The feedback we received was very helpful and very important, but you can get feedback from your friends and your family and your local community very quickly and decide and make a decision. Sometimes it's that gut feeling. Sometimes inside, like, this is something that's needed. This is something that I like. This is something that I know my circle will like and will do well. And you test and you take a small risk, and you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to sell all of your, life savings and all of your assets to make a huge investment. We started off very small. We had a few designs and a few pieces of each design, and we saw, how it would perform, and we kind of tweaked along the way.
So I want to kind of delve a little bit deeper into that. When it comes to building a foundation of a business, what do you think really matters in terms of areas of focus? And what are the first steps that you would recommend today when it comes to entering a space like this or a similar space?
So it's actually really affordable to get a prototype out, but it's just, being brave enough to go out there and spend that initial investment to get some kind of a prototype. And by the way, a prototype can also be like, you can like Frankenstein an existing product. So you can get like, a product from, I don't know, if you want to make like some new like yoga pants or something, like you can get them from like Lululemon, and then you can just like start to like, manipulate it physically, show it to people and talk about like your ideas and what you're trying to do. But eventually you want to actually get to a prototype. You want to eventually make contact with a supplier and be able to place like an initial like order. But it doesn't, I worked with a lot of different brands, and I was fortunate to see a lot of brands like day one or even day zero before they started and like scaling up, and it didn't require much of a collection, much of like an initial purchase order investment to get off the ground. And usually when people are like, hyper funded and they do a large like seed round, they're able to place like large purchase orders, but it also can just like kill their business really quickly. So in my opinion, I like to take things slow. I like to see like a business take their time, do the minimum amount of investment to get a prototype in hand, spend the minimal amount of money to get like feedback from people around, and then build off of that momentum and work their way up.
Yeah, I think there's a saying out there about growing slow, building a solid foundation. When you grow fast, usually you get tall, but then you're shaky, right? At the end of the day, it's really easy to break down. That's interesting. You mentioned funding, which was really something I wanted to talk about. I think the statistic is really shocking. I mean, lack of funding stops so many dreams from even starting. 63% of Americans say that's the biggest barrier for pursuing a business idea. What do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to people wanting to finance their ideas? And what's the playbook today in 2025 when it comes to, let's say I have this great idea, but I don't have any money to actually put some fire on it?
So, I definitely think it's a misconception. I think that there was a time when, and I mean, it might come back, when VC was like really hot and you could raise a ton of money, and money was just being thrown around almost aimlessly. And, even in the VC world now, there's a huge focus on profitability, and this shift happened very recently. All of a sudden, we realize businesses actually need to be profitable, and now you're getting more like EBITDA based valuations over like pure revenue. In e-commerce specifically, e-commerce was being valued like tech, and they were getting like 6 to 10x revenue valuations. Those days are completely gone, and they realize that the limiting factor with e-commerce versus tech, where you can scale it basically infinitely with minimal resources, service business, minimal overhead, etc. Lots of recurring revenue. It's very stable. With e-commerce, you have physical products. You have like supply chain constrictions, and then also distribution limitations. So you can't scale it infinitely. It's very expensive. And if you make the wrong purchase order, you can, based on like indicators of growth, you can easily over leverage yourself, and then you're out of business, or you're just like, really falling behind. So even in the more sophisticated realms of business, profitability has come back into focus. And then, as a entrepreneur, I still stand by the fact that I think it's quite affordable. even if you have like your day job or like your main job, you can still start to invest in something on the side, because with probably, $1,000, you can throw up a website, you can get a prototype, you can conceive of a brand, and you can start to get feedback on your product. And with maybe like another $1,000, you could get, a small amount of merchandise and go to like a trunk show and start selling, and you can snowball that. So there's obviously like different, there's access to capital. You can talk to like people in the community. You can try and find like, friendly investors and things like that to help you kind of like get off the ground, or friends and family and whatnot. But yeah, I think like, the people who are launching a business, trying to, become the next Mark Zuckerberg and, become a billionaire in a very short time, those kinds of businesses are like monstrosities. Lululemon was founded in like 1998. I know it's the second time I talk about them. I'll just keep popping into my head. But they took a very long time to become one of the most successful like fashion brands. And, leveraging like the compounding equation. If you can grow just like over a period, and in the beginning periods might be, based on different events that you can go to and like actually like sell your product in person. So maybe you do like 2-3 a year or whatever. But if you can like get into like a 20-30% growth rate, and eventually like annually you're consistently hitting that, within 10 years you'll be a massive business. But no one wants to be a massive business over 10 years. Everyone wants to be a massive business overnight. So I think it's just, you have to have the right mentality. You have to be okay that a business will take a very long time to achieve scale. And do it in a more consistent, safe way than like putting all your eggs in one basket, being really anxious, securing that $30,000, but then like, feeling like you need to like turn it into like 200 really quickly, and then burning out, versus actually taking it slow, taking your time, getting feedback every step of the way, where people are like demanding your product and letting that drive the growth, versus, it with like forcing it with money, basically.
I'm really interested to hear that you mentioned intention was really important going into it. And then also in your mind, you kind of have this like playbook where you see like, all right, this successful entrepreneur, this person that's kind of minded where it's more impact focused than let's say profitability focused or revenue focused. What are like the best goals to have in the first 5 years when it comes to launching a business?
I think you really have to have a strong purpose for what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really has to be in the center of that, because at the end of the day, like, you can win the dunya, but then you lose the akhirah in the process. And I'm not claiming to be someone who's like mastered that at all by any means, but I just know like from experience, whenever you kind of like, and even like taking shortcuts to success, and forsaking your principles or your values or whatever, you never feel like you actually gained anything at the end of the day. So I think if you're intentional about like what you're doing, which is like it's wealth accumulation, and your goal can be to become a billionaire, I think that's totally fine. But what are you going to do with that $1 billion? Because the Prophet ﷺ never hoarded $1 billion, and the Sahaba never hoarded $1 billion, right? Yeah. In fact, they would have a ton of money in the morning, and by the end of the day, it would all be given away. And actually, Sheikh Yaser, if was on your podcast, he's one of my heroes, because he emphasizes so much the importance of like as a community, taking care of one another and giving to the community. And that was like central to the Prophet's character, and his whole mission was to be a mercy to everybody. So I feel like if we lose sight of that, then we're doing it aimlessly. And on the day of judgment, all this wealth that you accumulated is worthless. So along the way, you have to make sure that you're having an impact on those around you and your community and so on. And somehow you have to propagate that with your wealth accumulation. If you're doing that, then inshallah, Allah is going to allow you to continue to succeed, and there'll be barakah on everything that you do. But if you don't, then you're gonna run into a lot of issues along the way. I think with Muslims specifically, that's going to be true. And I'm sure it's come up often in your conversations where people have kind of like discovered more about their spirituality in their business journey, all different kinds of lessons and things. I think that's the cost of doing business, is that you're going to really face yourself, and you're going to have to correct things about yourself along the way for you to continue to progress in the material side. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He loves us, He doesn't want us to get lost in the materialism. So on the path, like if a Muslim has their intentions straight on the path to wealth accumulation, if their intentions are good, they're also going to develop themselves spiritually quite significantly.
No, it's so interesting what you mentioned, because I think, like you mentioned, the thing that keeps on coming up within this first season of Muslim Made is the fact that the most successful Muslims that we'll ever run into are the ones that are impact focused versus revenue focused or number focused. They're always wondering, okay, how can I impact, or how can I improve the lives of XYZ? And I wanted to understand, when it comes to that mentality, who are your guys' biggest influences that you feel like has led you to this, like, perspective on business and impact today?
Just to touch a little bit on the spirituality aspect, I 100% agree that in order to be a successful Muslim entrepreneur, you really have to build that spirituality along the way, because the highs are so high and the lows are so low, and you can get so lost in the process if you really don't fine tune that aspect. There's been a lot of influences in my journey specifically. And I think it goes back to like my family unit, especially my father. Since we were kids, he was an early riser. He says the most successful people wake up early. They take advantage of those first few hours of the day when everyone is asleep, when it's quiet, when it's peaceful, when you can focus, when you have the most energy. And I remember even as like school kids, he would wake us up literally 3rd, 4th grade. You have a science test that day. Don't stay up late and study. We used to go to sleep at like 7:30, 8 p.m., probably up until like high school. I remember this like vividly. But wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and pray Fajr and review that chapter for an hour before you go to school. Until this day, I wake up early, and I think that's been like one of the most like successful attributes in everything I've taken on in my life. Waking up early is life-changing, and taking advantage of those few hours in the morning. Sometimes you get more done in those first few hours than you do for the rest of the day. And on the flip side, I sleep very early because I need my rest and I need my sleep. And I think that's also very helpful. So, my parents and my father played a huge role in just kind of like building, the character that I needed to kind of take on these things and have the energy and have the that hustle and that grind. I'm also like partners with my wife, which could be like the best thing and the hardest thing in like a business endeavor. But being aligned and being able to tackle problems together, that's part of marriage first, like to try to have a successful marriage and then take that into other parts of life and business and entrepreneurship. It has its ups and downs, and you face a lot of challenges along the way. But working alongside her is the reason we were able to achieve what we achieve. And anytime anyone visits us or we speak about the business, or we're speaking to an investor or a new manufacturer or a new partner, I give all the credit and kudos to her. She came up with the idea of Veiled from A to Z. I got pulled in at one point as like manual labor. It's like, hey, there's like 30 boxes downstairs. I need you to bring them upstairs, and I need you to go drop these off to the post office. That's my initial, involvement in Veiled. Other than like, obviously pushing her like, hey, this is an idea and you should pursue this. And I got your back. Like, go on and take this. I think it has a lot of potential, and you could be your own boss and you can, run the show and do what you need to do. And then tapping into resources, both at like a local level, community level, networking with both Muslims and non-Muslims. You won't believe how many people are willing to share their experience, are willing to talk about their success. Unfortunately, especially growing up in this community, you sometimes feel like everyone wants to hide stuff from each other, especially like maybe the older generation. Whereas us, like I'll sit in a room with like 5 or 6 entrepreneurs, and we're discussing day-to-day details that you'll never hear maybe our fathers have ever spoken about, because they don't want to tell the trade secret. They don't want to, give away the secret sauce. They don't want to talk about how they achieved or attained this. But when you start sharing, and you're sharing it, with your pure intent to like help others, and others are trying to help you, like he said, you're building that community, and that community is like pushing each other to continue to grow and succeed. So it's never wrong to like ask for help. It's never wrong to seek help. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of resources, a lot of people willing to speak to you. You just have to get out of your way, get out of that comfort, break through that comfort level and be able to ask the question. And I think that's something Kareem really brought onto the team when he joined us, because he's very like solution focused and takes on the problems head on. And he'll reach out to different networks and different groups and say, hey, this is what we're dealing with. Like, who wants to spend like 15 minutes on the phone with me to figure this out? Which is something I never did early on, and learned a lot from him. And you'll be so surprised. Wow. Where sometimes it'll just be like, hey, reach out to this person, or like download this app, or run this script. And it's life-changing. And I hope by us like being able to, give back and share our experience as well, that it also kind of comes back and helps us moving forward. And that's the whole basis of our tradition and our deen and everything else. We're supposed to look out for each other. We're supposed to have this brotherhood and sisterhood and sense of community to help, engage us and push us along.
No, it's amazing what you mentioned, especially at the beginning of your kind of competitive edge when it comes to life is waking up early. I think Benjamin Franklin gets a lot of credit for early birds in terms of his saying, I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, early to bed, early to rise makes you wealthy, healthy, and wise. But I think if we take a step back and realize that Prophet ﷺ brought the tradition of Salah and how the Fajr is the start of the day and the foundation, it's even better than early to rise. It's before the sun even rises, So alhamdulillah, and I appreciate how much you were talking about when it comes to creating a community and creating a sense of resources for Muslims when it comes to the pitfalls that they might fall into. What do you think over the years has been the top mistakes that you see when it comes to entrepreneurs or Muslim entrepreneurs that they make when it comes to scaling their ideas into an actual sustainable business?
I'm going to start off because for the first 3 or 4 years, it was only me and my wife. So we built the business to a very healthy level of growth. We were always afraid to take that next step. So when we first engaged Kareem, we were very afraid to hire a marketing agency. It's like, we can figure it out. You can watch some videos. You can throw some money on ads. You can figure out ads manager. And you speak to a lot of ads agencies and marketing agencies and performance marketing agencies, and they just spit out these crazy numbers. You don't know what they're talking about. The data and the metrics that they're monitoring, you don't know how accurate it is. So there was like a lot of challenges to making a commitment to take on, a performance marketing agency. And then after a few years of working with him, so he started his agency, and that's where the relationship started. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we reached out to him and we're like, listen, we would have these meetings. He would give us amazing ideas outside of marketing. Like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of changing the website over here, making a landing page for this, think about, this event, think about this product. So he was giving us business ideas with no true, involvement in the business other than the marketing side. And we reached a point where, the business is growing. There's clearly an opportunity here. We need to now start building a true team. It can't just be us two together by ourselves.
When did you realize that?
When we just couldn't keep up anymore. So I'm in residency. So that's in itself super grueling.
By the way, Yaser would be, he'd get up in the morning, he'd go to the office, and there'd be like, hundreds of orders in the system. He'd be packing the orders, moving boxes, go to the hospital, at lunch, come back, work in the warehouse, then back to being a doctor. Then at the end of the day, come back, break down a shipment. And, they're in Albany and I'm in New Jersey. And it's just the two of them. And, they don't have like their community around them or their friends or their family or anything.
One of the biggest walls that entrepreneurs and Muslim entrepreneurs want to get through is their duties to the 9-to-5, the duties to their family. You were really successful around navigating it and being able to not only compartmentalize, but dedicate energy into everything. What was the key to that?
I don't know if I was successful in compartmentalizing and doing all that. I kind of just put my head down and just did what I had to do. So I think the turning point actually was the birth of my daughter, Lina. And I remember she was born a few weeks early. Alhamdulillah, healthy, angelic. I love that girl. And that night that she was born, we had something going on the website, or some piece of content went viral. And my wife is in labor, and I'm just looking at my phone, and there's like orders coming in, hundreds of orders. I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't leave my wife in the hospital. We have no one. It's me and her. We don't have a team. I don't have people working in the warehouse. It's literally me and her. And so the baby was born. We spend a few hours. Mom finally wants to take get some rest. The baby's in the nursery. I'm like, I'm going to leave for a few hours. I'm packing orders. My wife wakes up. I'm back to the hospital. She falls asleep. I'm back to packing orders. And I'm running back and forth. And at that point, you realize that, one, I'm a father now. So not only am I a husband and a physician in training, but I'm also a father. And it's just not sustainable. And it's like, you risk burning out. You have to now start really investing in growing that team. So that, there are like a few pivotal periods. Kareem brought so much to the table other than the performance marketing side. We reached out to him and we're like, hey, we want you to be the CEO of our company. And we were okay with that. And a lot of people are like, how could you be founders and bring on someone to be your CEO? One of like the most important pieces of advice that I ever got back, like, I got from someone along the journey was, you can't be the best at everything. You'll never be the best at everything. Figure out your skill set, figure out what you enjoy doing and what you're passionate about and what you're going to, really bring to the table. You focus on that. And the other areas of the business where you might not be as passionate about or not as good at, that's where you start filling those voids. So I knew Kareem was very growth oriented. He really understood numbers. He really understood the finances. He really understood performance. We brought him on as our CEO, and it was his responsibility, one, to continue to grow the business and to start building our team, start hiring key figures and key roles. And that's one of the hardest things to do, I think, in business, because it's like, my wife has been designing for the last 4 years, and she's putting out hundreds of designs a year. Why do I really need to hire a designer?
Right.
Well, okay, look, by bringing a designer who starts the process and now it's getting approved by Nuro, you open up X amount of hours, which are a lot more valuable for her to be focused on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which will take the business even further. Yaser, you're really good at the logistics and operational side. Start putting systems in place to start, dealing with these orders that are coming in. It doesn't make sense for you to be lifting these boxes anymore and opening up these boxes and picking and packing orders. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing was, because we started it, and we started it from scratch, and we spent the first few years doing everything ourselves, we experienced every single one of these roles, every single one of these positions, every single aspect of the business. And I think that's also really important. Successful entrepreneurs really understand all aspects of their business, have gotten their hands dirty, have done it themselves. They know where the challenges, problems, and bottlenecks are. They start coming up with solutions. And when you start building a team, you've been there, you've been in their shoes. And when you need to step in, you're able to, get alongside them, roll up your sleeves and do whatever you need to do. Whether it's literally taking out garbage, picking and packing an order, or sitting on in a board meeting trying to raise your first round. So that's, I think, a lot of the secret sauce up front, being able to really get down and dirty. And even for him, when he started, I didn't ask this of him, but we'd get a big shipment. He's like, hey, I'm coming up there. I want to see what you got. I just want to see how you approach it. I want to see how you're thinking about it. I want to lift the boxes and I want to cut it open and I want to put it on the table and count what's inside and see everything that you're doing so I can understand how I can fix this, how I can make it better, what I need to think at scale. So Kareem, early on really got himself really involved in the business, from, basic labor to the most intricate, problems that we were faced with.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your take, Kareem. You mentioned leadership, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But what do you think is the most common pitfalls and mistakes that entrepreneurs make when it comes to scaling their big ideas?
I think it's not just with entrepreneurship, but just in general, when you're trying to excel at anything, having an open mind and being, and what Yaser was talking about earlier, being able to talk to others and learn from them, surrounding yourself with the right people. And these are all things we hear all the time, but they're, inshallah is khair and reiterating them. I think truly that's what it is. You really have to have a flexible mind. You have to be aware of your biases. You have to be aware of your blind spots and willing to learn from others, because business isn't a gamble. It really is not just rolling the dice. You can actually engineer business, and there's a way to be methodical about it. And there might not be there's Andrew Tate has Tate University, and I think Trump has Trump University and all this stuff. And there'll be these gurus that have these universities, but the people who really know what they're doing, they're too busy being growing their businesses to actually. And maybe there's things out there that are successful and actually adding value, but I think just if you were to pursue any body of knowledge, being intentional about learning how a business can grow. And in my experience, the best advice I ever got, and Yaser spoke about this earlier, is I would reach out to businesses who were at the next stage, or maybe two stages ahead. And you could even simplify it. It's almost like a revenue gradient, a business that made its first 100,000, first $500,000, million, 5 million, 10 million, etc. Right? So you kind of have these milestones, and there's a kind of break points in scale that just happen naturally. 10 million is a huge number. 50 million is another really big number. That's where private equity gets involved, etc. And beyond that, inshallah, you go public or something. But kind of see where you are. If you're pre-revenue, all right, let me find someone who's post-revenue, and let me talk to them and learn from them. Now, how to network, how to connect with people, how to, and also give something back in return, or be a student of that kind of knowledge. there's obviously so much like that one can do to get better at that. But I think that's kind of like the trick. Being patient with learning is probably like the summary of all that. Like really having a good attitude towards learning and not and being open-minded about your limitations and what you don't know, and be willing to learn more.
There's something that you mentioned that was super interesting. Let's talk about engineering business. Is there really a way for business to be a science instead of an art form? Can it really be a formula, like a recipe, instead of kind of rolling the dice and hoping that, they kind of land in the right way?
Yeah. This is something I'm super passionate about, and like yes or no's, I can go off for hours on this. Like,
let's do it.
I was going to say, give Kareem his time to shine right now. But the simple answer, by the way, is yes. In e-commerce, yes, it can be engineered. There's a very specific recipe that you can follow, so long that the team is there and so long that there is a product that will do well. And Kareem will give you the details in between, because he's opened up my eyes to this, and we speak about this all of the time.
Yeah, like I and this started with like when I was doing like more performance marketing. When I first started doing marketing, it was back in like 2012. So it was kind of like Facebook ads started to become really a thing. Google ads were like around a little bit longer, and they're really maturing. And so, but you open up like the Facebook ads manager and you dive in, and that's like the largest social platform. And like, especially with e-commerce or tech or whatever, that's like the main, even till now, like you have TikTok and all these other platforms, but Meta is still king. Somehow it works. I'm never on there. I don't know anybody else who like spends time there, but somehow you spend money on Meta and it kind of just like works, right? If I open up the hat store and it's in the middle of New York City and people walk inside and it's filled with blue cowboy hats, are my sales going to be as good as if it was filled with every kind of hat that people want to buy? Probably not, right? But if I take the perfectly stocked hat store and I put it in the middle of the woods, and there's no traffic, your sales are also going to be zero, right?
What have you learned over the years as the best way when it comes to approaching marketing and e-commerce that keeps a brand fresh, competitive, and ahead of the curve?
First of all, the product is everything, and being able to highlight those, like the product market fit specifically, I think is the key. Like it's the absolute key. Like people get into marketing, they start to get lost. They're not sure what they should be talking about. You have to be talking about that. I think having good promotions helps a lot, because then you have an excuse to communicate with your audience. So I think having promotions is a great tool. At least that's the way I think about it, or that we think about it. We don't think about it like it's not just that like we have to run a promo, but it's like actually an opportunity to communicate something, because you can grab people's attention because of the benefit that you're offering them with a sale or a deal or whatever. And the more that you can do that without like customer fatigue, the more opportunities you have to like test and iterate and like communicate. And then the last thing is like just like from if you want marketing to really feel social, like working with influencers and having really really good relationships with influencers and like building out those like pipelines is pretty key. And there's synergies like across all of that, but yeah, like at a high level, I think that's what's important.
I'd love to hear your take, Yaser.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot that goes into it. I think accepting the fact that if something bombs, it's not the end of the world, especially the way these algorithms are set, the way social media is. People are scrolling through. You put something out there, it doesn't perform the way you want. You put something else out there. You keep trying. You monitor what's going on. So, a big focus of our team is content and content creation and production. We have people who are fully focused on just producing content for us, whether it's an Instagram post, a tutorial on YouTube, for all the different platforms. And these people are focused on kind of trends and what's going on out there. And they're also focused on the data that we have internally of what's worked in the past, what's actively working at the moment, and moving forward. One of our biggest successes when we worked with Kareem's agency is truly, checking. And during periods, we were checking not every 2 days, but we were checking every day and sometimes multiple times a day. And a lot of these other agencies, like he mentioned, they'll check once a week or two, and you're not making a decision for every 2 weeks. You're really setting yourself back substantially. And then just hiring, creative people. So, I'm not creative whatsoever. I am the furthest thing away from creative. And sometimes like I challenge the creatives on the team, because they'll spend an hour and it's like, should we make this insert light purple or dark purple? And I'm like, who cares? Pick a shade of purple and send it out. Like, let's make a decision and move on. But having creatives who truly understand kind of what's going on in the market, truly understanding your audience, and understanding like the voice of the brand and the overall mission of the brand is huge. It's not just like anyone that can, put something together or take a really nice picture, open up their phone and say something really nice. There's a lot of different aspects. So, having the team all together under one roof, I think is so beneficial because they get to see how I operate and how I think. They get to see how Nuro operates and how Nuro thinks. They get to see how Kareem's approaching different problems. They're seeing the brand live. They're seeing things that are happening, as it goes, and making decisions quick. And it's okay to make decisions quick. And it's okay to, I tell the team all the time, I'll assign you a project, I'll assign you a task, I'll assign you something. And then when you're done or halfway through and you've put a lot of effort into it, we'll change gears. We'll say, forget this, scrap it. Something happened. Something changed in the world. Something changed in the business. Some new product just took off. Your effort is not lost. That's part of the nature of the beast that we're taking on. Do not feel bad. We see how much hard work you're putting in. We see the passion that you have. Don't feel bad that it didn't make it to, the final run. And sometimes it makes it to the final run. We'll have a whole photo shoot. We'll rent, a studio and models and spend weeks planning something out. And then once that content is ready and edited and ready to go, something changes. And you'll never see that content come to life. Yeah. But that's okay. You have to accept that. You have to accept that maybe the investment isn't going to show a return immediately. And you have to make a decision quickly that you think is going to be best for, the business and the performance and for what the audience is expecting from you.
Let's talk about the voice of the customer. You mentioned how the customer and making sure things are relevant to your customer base is extremely important in this kind of business. I think finding customers and building a community can sometimes feel impossible, especially in today where there's so many brands and the market is so saturated. What's the playbook for entrepreneurs who want to make a brand that feels like they're built for their audience? What was the secret, especially in those early days, about creating trust and making your audience feel like the brand was built for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's the voice of the brand itself, and then also the voice of that customer, and they need to align. It was very important for us in the early stages. We didn't care how big or how small. We would go to ISNA, we would go to ICNA, we'd go to these huge bazaars. You're talking about 30, 40,000 people there over a weekend, there to shop. And then we would go to the local masjid and set up a table, and there would be maybe 30, 40, 50 people that showed up to Isha and hung out after and maybe bought a dress. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily about making sales, but those face-to-face interactions, seeing someone engage with your product, give you feedback about your product, speak to you and say, man, like, it's been such a struggle for me to go anywhere in the summer and find something that's appropriate for me to wear or fits, checks off all the boxes for me. And this has been ongoing for years. And the only alternative I have is to like order something from overseas. And that's not a great experience either. We spent so much time doing these events, like literally 3 or 4 years. And as we scaled, like it would start from a small table to like booths and truckloads. And again, it was only me and my wife by ourselves during those early stages. So we were physically loading this truck, driving 14, 15 hours to Chicago, unloading, setting up the booth, standing there for 12, 13, 14 hours a day. You'd get back to your hotel room at the end of the day. Your feet are swollen. You're exhausted. You haven't eaten all day. But really listening to your customer will really, move that needle for you. And I don't think it's hard I think it's, in this age of technology and social media, if you realize what resonates with your target audience and target community, it's so easy to post about it, to put content out about it, and if you're genuine and your intent is clean and pure, I think people will naturally kind of, make their way towards you.
Can you share how you figured it out in the beginning? I mean, was it trial and error? What would you recommend for Muslims who feel like they just don't know how to solve their problems?
There was a lot of trial and error. So again, when we started, Veiled had a few products and it was just the kimono. And then if you look at, the audience today, while people wear that kimono style abaya, it's not what they wear every single day. And it's not what they're wearing casually. And it's not what they're wearing to school and work and things of that sort. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want? Well, we want hijabs, but there's like 100 hijab brands already. Like, we want to be different. Yeah, but we still want hijabs. Okay, how can we improve the hijab? What can we do to change the design? What can we do to stick out, to be a little bit different? So even though we disagreed almost on like what we heard, that's what the people wanted, and that's what we gave them. And then there were products that we released that we thought were going to kill it. We're like, we want to release like these cool leather jackets and these vegan leather sets. that are so cool, such high fashion, like beautiful. No one ever touched that piece and didn't think it was like one of the nicest pieces they've ever laid eyes on. But it didn't sell because that's not, we thought it was cool. We thought it was in, but it's not what people were asking for. And it's okay. Trial and error is very interesting. And Kareem actually kind of set this rule and created this mindset for us. 80% of the things that we put out there are things that we know have worked based on data, based on previous products, based on previous content. We have about 20% of budget, 20% of ads, 20% of content, 20% of design, where you can dabble and, go crazy with it. And we test. We test a ton. We do a ton of A/B testing. We release all sorts of products. We do A/B testing with our ads, with our checkout experience, with our website experience, with our landing pages, with the audience. And you got to trust the data. The beauty of e-commerce is you're collecting a boatload of numbers and data. If you learn how to utilize that, understand it, and analyze it, that is the recipe that we alluded to before to attain that success. Mind you, I had no idea how to do any of this. I am not a very intricate numbers guy. I don't have a data science background. I'm not an analyst. I'm not a statistician. I took basic, Calc 1, Calc 2 in my college days that I've never seen ever again. And that's where, it goes back to, again, tapping into resources and investing into team members that will be able to do the things that you don't do well. A big portion of our team is like data analytics. We have a lot of resources and a lot of investment that we've put into the business, not on content creators and fashion designers and data. Sit there and spreadsheets all day, like literally eat, live, breathe spreadsheets and understand your numbers. Your numbers tell you the story and they tell you what decision to make next.
What's the most overlooked part of the customer experience that you feel like is really underserved by Muslims?
I mean, again, we are a modest Muslim wear brand. We're a woman's brand. Women are minorities, Muslims are minorities. Modest fashion is a minority in the grand scheme of fashion. So they're an audience that are unheard. They're an audience that are underserved. They're an audience that are forgotten about. But they're not a small audience, and they're a very impactful audience. Realizing that before anybody else has been like a true key to our success. And now making people feel like they are heard and that you are there to serve them and you are there to provide them with a service and a need and a necessity has really been game changing for us. And it's really cool because a lot of the things that we've put out there have been first. So we hosted one of our first pop-up shops in Brooklyn last year, and it was a huge turnout. And there's a lot of things as we kind of look back in retrospect that we wish we could have improved and fixed upon. At the end of the day, it was the largest women's event gauged towards Muslims specifically, hosted in the history of this country. So there's so much that we can do in this space for our audience that's just not available to them.
It's insane. What's that taught you about the future of Muslim businesses? I'm really interested to hear both your takes on what excites you the most about the future of Muslim entrepreneurship and serving the Muslim community in America today.
We're sorry to
jump in.
If I cut you off. We're a very impactful community, especially our generation now that's coming. So, I'm what is it, first gen or second gen? So my parents came here as immigrants. We're born and raised here. Went through the school system, understand the culture, speak the language, understand, how things work. Our generation's really laying down, those roots. We're getting educated. We're going out into the workforce. We're gaining all these skills and knowledge. We speak the language. We understand the culture. We are a super impactful community. And if we come together and bring our resources together and bring our skill set together, we're going to kill it. And we're going to take over and, we're going to bring some really cool things onto the scene. But we have to learn to come together and work together. Competition's healthy. We love competition. And we work with our competitors, okay? If they're willing to work with us. So being able to come, it's the core of our deen and our tradition. Build the community. Allah will put barakah in it and will give you success in any endeavor that you take on. And then when you build that success on the wealth side, you're able to make like impactful decisions across the board. Now you're laying down institutions and giving back to causes that you believe in and being able to do things that you're truly passionate about outside of just running a business and making a lot of money and becoming rich and wealthy and doing those things. So I think there's a lot of excitement ahead. There's a lot of really cool Muslim entrepreneurs coming onto the scene. We have to learn to come together, work together, learn from each other's experiences. And it's really going to like take this, to the next level.
Yeah, amazing. I'd love to hear your take, Kareem.
It goes back to like really having an intentionality, like especially when you're dealing with like wealth, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you a ni'mah, and depending on how you use that, you're gonna be you're gonna have to answer for on the day of judgment. And just always being very intentional and understanding that you're not going to be on this planet for a long time, so you might as well. I think it's fine to take care of your family and give them a beautiful place to live, and then as soon as you do that, start to take care of like your siblings, your parents, your extended family, the people around you, your neighbors, your community, etc.
Yeah.
I really love like the Chobani founder's story.
Incredibly inspiring, huh?
Amazing. And I think most of his like employees ended up being partial owners in the company, and or at least they had like some kind of like profit sharing mechanism. The Prophet ﷺ, like he was a merchant before before the Nubuwwah, and he was known for being fully engaged in business, but also doing it like in a very like straightforward, honorable way. And so as a community, like recently, like Syria, inshallah is liberated, and hopefully it stays that way. Like for me, for example, when I saw that, I was just like, wow, like maybe we actually have a place where we could start to like build. And it would be so cool to see over the next like few decades, like inshallah, if it continues to be liberated, what will emerge from there. Like my wife is Syrian, and Nuro is actually Syrian too, and the Syrian people, mashallah, they're entrepreneurs. I mean, they they got displaced, and I'm Egyptian. In Egypt, they built like grocery stores, restaurants. Like in Egypt, like a funny story, my cousin, when I went to visit, he's like, listen, I got to take you to this place. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, what's this place? And I have like all these like thoughts about like why he's so excited and what it might be. And then he's like, listen, we got to go to this grocery store. He's like, I'm like, a grocery store? He's like, dude, they give out samples for free. And we go there, and it's like, Syrians came in and they opened a grocery store, and they did like some like, the basic things like that like we experience here in the West and whatnot. But I'm like in Egypt, like giving away anything for free is like,
Egyptian Costco.
Right. So I mean,
and by the way, not related, and keep your thought, please. But one of the funniest videos after, everything that ensued in Syria was a bunch of Egyptians came on, TikTok and social media, and they're like, we're so happy for the Syrian people, and we're so glad that they're liberated and they're free, and we encourage the Syrians that came to Egypt to go back and visit, but we ban you from going back because we can't live without the Syrian food and restaurants and everything that they've brought to the scene.
But yeah, I mean that's like when you talk about like Muslim entrepreneurship and like that kind of like what comes to mind is and like the community thing around that. Like we just saw this mass exodus of like Syrians going into all these other countries and enhancing their local, like wherever they land, they just like they sprout businesses and they like they add all this value. Well, that's what we should be doing as entrepreneurs in general. And then I just get excited about Syria because, inshallah, if it is, inshallah, continues to be liberated, well, I hope that will start to become like almost like a magnum opus for like Muslim entrepreneurship. Yeah. And I think that it definitely ties into like what our psyche should be. Like if you're here in the West or like wherever you are, you have to have the ummah on your mind. And it's not just like you're in a vacuum building a business. Like how does your business tie into the community? How does it tie into potentially like into the global scene? And we should just always be looking to like whether it's a Syrian landing in like a small street corner and like opening up a little bodega, or whether you're like a big e-commerce business or whatever, like how are you impacting in the frame of like being a part of like the Muslim ummah and like this like big body that we're all part of.
SubhanAllah, man. I think we should really recognize as an ummah and as younger Muslims that we have the potential of creating a golden age ahead of us. Yes. Where we are seeing the beginnings of a real shift in the world, a real stake in writing our future. And I think we should recognize the fact that if we want to live in a world that we are proud to live a part of, we have to begin today and facilitate that sort of success. Like you said, through the community around us. And I think especially seeing everything going around in the world, we should recognize the fact that there's literally never been a better time to reach out to a brother or friend and say, hey, I have this and that idea. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of barakah in it. I think there's a lot of impact in it. You've done XYZ before. What is something that you can tell me that'll help me facilitate a more successful path in it? I think if there's a lower chance of failure, I think it's today.
I want to touch on that. Like, and this is something, it was like so obvious to me for whatever reason, like maybe, it was because like when I'm also first generation. When my parents came here, they started a laundry business, and my dad worked in a few laundry shops, and then he like struck off on his own, and we were isolated. Like our extended family wasn't here, and I was like in Central Jersey, and like there wasn't a lot of like masjid around. We had to drive pretty far to like go to the masjid. But what I had this longing for like, and my parents would tell me stories about the Prophet and his companions, and that was like the only silver lining, was like this like kind of utopia that they would describe. And then when you interact with the community, to no fault, like I'm not bitter about like the community when I say this, but like we have a lot of faults, including like me, you know, all of us, we have like tons of faults. But the refreshing thing is that when you look back on our history, is that the Prophet ﷺ was the companions and the Prophet, everything was for everybody. It wasn't like, you know, we come here, we're isolated, we have to kind of like fend for ourselves, and we got to like, you know, we have this like huge like defense mechanism against everybody. It's lack of trust. There's like, it's like, if I don't like secure this, like somebody's going to take it away from me. Like my mom used to always say like be careful, like they're going to eat your right, you know? And it's like, subhanAllah, like no one can eat your right. You know, your right is preserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what. But we have this like, and it comes from like, you know, our places back home and like all these different things. But I think when I think of like, you know, you see what's happening in the Middle East, you see what's happening in India, Bangladesh, in Yemen, everywhere, Sri Lanka, like all these different places, you see Muslims are literally being oppressed everywhere. 1 million innocent civilians died in Iraq. Crazy, you know, and like, you know, the media didn't talk about it. No one said anything. It was just kind of like something that just happened. And it's like, you know, we don't have the luxury of being like so isolated, you know. We can continue to do that, but we really don't have the luxury. And one day, like no matter who you are, how rich or successful you are, if you are isolated, you know, we're all going to be victim to, you know, what these global powers are doing to the Muslims. So I think if you identify as a Muslim and you know, you want to be sincere, I think you cannot think of like your business or the thing, you know, this ni'mah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you as just for yourself. You know, like Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan was wealthier than any Muslim alive today, and he would give it all away to the Muslims. I'm saying Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, all the companions, they had tons of wealth. They'd just give it all away. And obviously we don't have like a kind of like a deposit source like the Prophet ﷺ, where it's like you can give it all away and like someone's going to do like really, really good things with it. But you also can't be so like can't hold on to it so tightly and be so scared of losing it.
I think it goes back to like our parents' mentality when it comes to like rights and when it comes to succeeding. I think a lot of us are coming from cultures and places where the only way to succeed was to kind of eat off of this like one singular pie, and if you didn't eat, then most likely not you would end up empty-handed. I think we live in a little bit of a different world today. I think we have to acknowledge that fact that a lot of the success that we create for ourselves is only making the pie a little bit bigger, right? We're not fighting over like the same share. What do you think has been the greatest piece of advice over, you know, this incredible journey that you guys have had, Yaser, with you and Nuro, your wife? What's the greatest thing that keeps kind of playing in the back of your head as like something that keeps you centered, but also keeps you dreaming ahead and keeps you expanding the barakah of that pie? I don't know why I chose pie of all things, but
I mean, to go off a little bit about what you guys just mentioned, even as a kid leaving Jum'ah, walking out of the masjid, the guy standing there with the donation box, and he goes, "Ma naqasa malun min sadaqa." You never lose by giving. And from our deen and tradition, again, you know, if you operate a business under the tenets of our deen and tradition and sunnah and sharia, it's almost impossible to go wrong. So if you don't have money to give, you can give knowledge. And if you don't have knowledge to give, at the bare minimum, give a smile, right? And that comes from our deen and tradition. It's crazy. It's sometimes almost immediate. And it's like a little scary where you take on an endeavor or you support a project or you make a donation, whatever it may be. And you see this immediate an immediate response to it, whether it be financial or something that happens online or something that happens in the business or something that happens internally to yourself, on an individual level or to your family. And as Muslim entrepreneurs, this is part of like coming together and supporting each other and helping each other. So, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given, and I wasn't always like this, I've evolved quite a bit. And Kareem played a big role in that evolution. Because when we started, again, it was me and my wife, and we had each other's backs, and we were kind of on the same page, and we operated under the same umbrella. And now you're starting to bring in different personalities and different views on how to tackle things. So you really have to evolve and learn how to work with the people around you in order to be successful. And he's played a huge role in the evolution of. Because before I was very private and I didn't want to share what I was doing, and I didn't, because I felt like, oh my God, I just came across this thing and I need to like take advantage and like catapult it and do everything myself. And I learned very quickly. I tell him, like, I can't believe this guy just told us this. Like, he spent 30 years trying to like figure out this problem, and he just like sent us, the solution, like after having a 20-minute conversation, because he got cool with us on a call. So there is no secret recipe in business. I can share with you a lot of the quote unquote trade secrets. It's very hard for you to take that and tomorrow go affect me, put me down, and take over whatever it is that I'm doing. Because we're already in the grind, we're already in the process, we're already growing, we're already taking these things on. So helping others and sharing with others really will only come back to benefit you in the end. And by putting good and khair out there, it's only going to benefit us as a community. So that's really been very pivotal and important for us. And we're always finding creative ways of one, as a brand, how we can give back, but how we can also help like kind of local entrepreneurs, the local community, even taking on this. Like, this is literally the first time we've ever been on a podcast. We're very private people. We don't like to put our faces out there. We're not important in the grand scheme of Veiled. We're making decisions in the background. We're trying to do our best. We are real people at the end of the day, doing these things. But we want people to focus on Veiled and what Veiled is doing, the brand. So it was very scary for us to take on like something like this and put our faces out there, because we don't want to, misconstrue things or come across or be misinterpreted. But why not? Like, you guys reached out. It sounded like a great, genuine purpose. Hopefully someone out there, even if it's one person, listens to this and gets motivated to just like take on that project that they've been thinking about for so long, and feel comfortable reaching out to someone and take a tidbit, that'll help them in the journey and the struggle that they go through. Because it's a journey, man. The whole thing from start to end is a journey with a lot of highs and really bad lows. And if you don't have that sense of community around you, it's very easy to give up and walk away and just like forget it.
I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, Sheikh Yaser Fahmy. I was so fortunate to go to this retreat, which when my wife told me about it, I was like, yeah, like, let's go to a retreat, no problem. It was honestly transformational. I feel like, I know I'm sitting here like talking to you, and like I know he probably sat here. Like, we are not on the same level. Like Sheikh Yaser, mashallah, he is like, in outer space. But I mean, we were in this retreat, and he's like, everyone, people always, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, people always talking about, I deserve this and I deserve that, and he's like, you don't even deserve to live. Like, and he started laughing, but because alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us all into existence, and inshallah we all deserve to live. But he's saying like, you really don't. You don't really deserve anything, but we really hype ourselves up like we're these like big important people, and when anything doesn't go our way, it becomes like really difficult to deal with, and then people like go into depression, or like they lose control of themselves, and like all these different things. That's something that's always going through my head. Whenever something is like really bothering me, I remind myself what he said when he laughed and was like, you don't even deserve to live. And I'm like, and I'll tell my wife sometimes, like when I'm going through different things, I'm like, hey, Lena, remember, he said we don't even deserve to live. Like, there's nothing to be upset about. Like, everything's okay. And then the other thing was like, he described like, husband and his wife. And he's like, when you come home at the end of the day, maybe it's your job to go and get the money and be the breadwinner and do this and that. And like, maybe it's your wife's role to like, take care of the home and take care of the kids. But if you come home and your wife is like exhausted and tired, regardless of like what the rules and regulations are, if you want to be muhsin, then you should push yourself to help her despite what the rules are. I think it's something very important in business too. Like, you might have a contract with somebody, and yeah, it's your right to X, Y, and Z. But if you remind yourself that ihsan is not, about you, it's about being selfless, then it's okay. Like, what we said before, like, no one's going to eat your rights at the end of the day. If you give something up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not lost. That's something I wish I had much earlier in my entrepreneurial journey, because I think I would have been a lot more like forthright. I think I would have been a lot more selfless. And I think back on like different moments where I've interacted with people where I was selfish or like really worried about, like, I had good reasons, but they're not they're not at the level of like ihsan, right? And I hope, inshallah, like we're all muhsinin, and inshallah, like even beyond that. But yeah, that's something that subhanallah, like we went to this retreat and I kind of like stumbled into it, sort of like my wife was like really passionate, mashallah. She spends like a lot of time like really consuming like all these beautiful content from like different people, and she's always like pointing me to like different events and different things, and I just kind of stumble in there, and then I walk away with like all this benefit. But that's something that's like been pivotal for me, just like getting back to being, because like on the journey you really get lost in the sauce, and it really helps to have someone as inspiring as him so accessible to us.
Yeah, I think you were mentioning how, we're all human, and you mentioned Sheikh Yaser Fahmy, an absolute gem. I think he's helped me personally so much navigate a lot of darkness and depression, just simply off of the fact that you were mentioning entitlement. I think he gives a fantastic perspective on entitlement. Entitlement is like this nafsani like perspective of feeling like you're owed something before you're getting it. And I think what he's helped me understand, like you're saying, is that at the end of the day, you're owed nothing. The fact that you're living, you have an opportunity to pursue something, is all that you're owed, And I think it's empowered me so much to avoid like that depression, or that, everyone kind of calls it like seasonal depression, right? Where things are kind of like getting dark, slowing down. You aren't feel like you're yourself. At the end of the day, if you're with Allah, then opportunity will come. Just be there. And I appreciate you so much for mentioning that, because sometimes, it takes reminding for you to like snap yourself out of the hypnosis of dunya. And
hypnosis is a great word for it. It really feels like that sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Subhanallah. I want to take one more look back with this journey. What was one of the biggest challenges that you're thankful of?
One of the coolest challenges that we've actually faced as a brand, we are a Muslim modest wear brand. We are a women's wear brand, and very underrepresented in fashion, in business, in startups, in e-com. Being able to sit in a room with a bunch of PEs or VCs or big money guys, or, marketing experts, the biggest e-com operators in the world, and tell them that we're Muslim founders, we have a Muslim brand. Our messaging, you go on our website, there's girls in hijab. It says Ramadan Mubarak. We speak about Palestine. We speak about all these causes that are really important to us. And being able to explain to them how impactful the work that we do is, how impactful the audience that we serve is, and being able to like deal with the ignorance that comes with that. Like, we've sat in meetings and it's like, you guys sell hijab? Like, isn't that like just not cool anymore? Like, people still do that. People still wear that.
Can't they just get it from the mosque?
Yeah. Like, this was a direct quote from a guy.
That, like big Wall Street, like
and recent, like this is not like this is like 10, 30, 50 years ago. This was in the last.
He's like, forgive me for my potential ignorance here, but can they just like get it from the mosque? Like, why do they need to buy it like in a store?
So just to bring awareness to that is probably one of like the most grateful and has made me like more proud of one, being a Muslim, and like the work that we do, and two, like my wife is my partner and co-founder, and really who started all of this. I now have a daughter as well. To have their backs, like they go out in the world, me and you go out in the world, and people might not really know if we're a Muslim or not. Okay, we rock a beard, maybe we look a certain way, we have certain skin complexion. We could get away with a lot of things. They're out there dealing with this attitude all the time. So bringing that awareness, and that we're part of this society, we're a cool part of this society. We're an awesome brand that's like really like moving the needle, getting recognition from other brands that are not in the space, that are like, oh my God, like people really care about this stuff. People really want this stuff. And then realizing that you've barely scratched the surface. Like, we're so hyper focused locally, And even though we do a lot of global work and sell globally, we haven't touched what's left out there, and the opportunity on there is so untapped. So that's a really exciting challenge, and it may. I don't want to say it sets us back. Some people are like, Muslim brand, hijab brand. Like, I don't want to invest in that. That's not exciting. Like, what's really the opportunity there? But being able to prove them wrong. Like, come back a year later and it's like, look, remember those sales targets I told you we were going to hit? Take a look at this. We've exceeded them. Remember when we told you we were going to have this many people show up to an event? Vex showed up to the event. So that's really cool. Just like bringing a light to that experience.
You mentioned light. Yeah, it's so interesting because while we don't need the approval, and I think sometimes we get lost with just trying to get approval for ideas and stuff before we consider anything a success. It just shows you like the feedback that you got from that meeting with PE, with private equity. It just shows you like there's so much growth in impact that is possible as long as we stay the course and kind of, like you said, like prove them wrong, kind of write our own history. I think that's, if I had to answer my own question, that's the thing I'm most excited about when it comes to like the future of Muslim entrepreneurship. Like it rolls back into, why Muslim Made was created, to like create a platform to inspire Muslims, that there are amazing stories and knowledge out there of Muslim-made products and leaders and change makers. Just to close the loop altogether, like we can't thank you enough for being a part of this story, sharing your story. And I know it's very tough, especially within this space, to be vulnerable and to show a face to something that's so mission-driven. Jazakallah khairan. I want to just close things off by saying that Muslim-Made wouldn't be possible without you guys coming on and actually sharing what you've created and what you guys have supported with this brand so far. And I can't wait to see where it goes. Hopefully you guys had as much fun as I did, just kind of facilitating the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Likewise, we really appreciate you having us on board. We wish you guys all the success, and inshallah, we continue to see exciting work like this here in the community. And alhamdulillah, it's been an awesome experience, and we hope that it resonates well. And
you see, I got so excited, threw my pen across the room.
We'll see, maybe a part 2 one day.
Inshallah. Where can our listeners connect? Inshallah, I think this will come out close to some time of gift giving. So where can our listeners connect, and hopefully either buy a hijab or a gift for themselves or a family member?
Of course. So you could find our site at www.veiled.com, Veiled Collection on social media, on Instagram. Both me and Kareem are active on LinkedIn, and I'm sure our information will be linked to the podcast. So you guys are always welcome to reach out to us. And, if we're able to help in any sort of capacity, we'll try our best. But yes, we're excited to, see the final piece, and I hope that it's a benefit out to the world. And, we encourage everyone to, just put their head down, start, and see where things go.